I clicked the links for Odysee, Chute, and thanks for the recent crypto donation. Unfortunately, you're anonymous because it's crypto, so sending thanks out to you for that. I can't imagine getting excited for anything on. This is AMC. I don't know who owns that, but it's one of those alphabet corporations because there's like a dozen companies own basically all of your brainwashing propaganda. I mean, mainstream media. I can't imagine getting excited about AMC, Netflix, any of this streaming cancer, or there's a new Marvel movie coming out. Hey, at one time, I'll freely admit, like when they started the new modern era of, when I say Marvel, I loosely mean Sony, Fox. I mean the superhero genre. It doesn't matter if it's DC or Marvel. The superhero genre that kind of started about 20 years ago. Iron Man 1 came out. I thought it was fantastic. Yes, I know it's not Casablanca, but they had a good run with the Avengers and X-Men and Iron Man, and yeah, I'm throwing Spider-Man in there and all the DC stuff. Yeah, they had a really good run. There was like 20 years of fun, silly movies. But that's all over now. Like 2016 should have been the writing on the wall. Trump's arrangement syndrome. Fair enough. But 2020 riots, it's like, okay, you can just pack it up. I mean, you can enjoy the old stuff. Or heaven forbid, write a book, write a comic book, write a movie, write a script. Write a script that you can start turning it into a comic book. In your mind, it can be a movie. But I mean, it's like, oh, well, you've got like a 1 in a million chance of making that into a movie. Yeah, but it's better than watching AMC or Netflix. There's no excitement for that. Or even, Venom 2 wasn't horrible. Yeah, that's the best you can say for Venom, for Black Widow, for Shang-Chi, or the G.I. Joe, Cobra, all this other stuff. It's like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Or Venom 2. It's like, oh, it was okay. It was okay. It's like 7 out of 10. Well, the earlier stuff was fantastic for what it was. It's like, just going down to seeing something that, it wasn't that woke. Well, the beatings will continue until morale improves. I mean, it's at the point where even the optimist, and I see these YouTube channels who are like, these are really like diehard movie guys. I won't name the guys, some of the names, but they're like really into this thing. Like legitimately, they're not just doing this for YouTube ad stuff. They're really into the genre of movie stuff. And it's like these super optimist guys. You gotta read the writing on the wall and realize, I should probably spend my time writing a comic book as opposed to trying to seek some spark in the crappy movies that are on the horizon. I'm trying to say it's crap. It's all crap. There's going to be like a tiny little spark among an ocean of darkness, and it's just not worth waiting in the ocean to swim past all these just like really apathetic sharks. Okay, so race swapping to the point of absurdity. Hashtag only skinny white girls can be goth. I remember the 90s. Probably the early 90s, late 80s, when, I don't know if it was goth or emo, I think it was goth. Goth's a cool style, it worked really well. I think Edward Scissorhands had a lot to do with that, Johnny Depp about 30 years ago. Okay, so the whole gothic thing, that only works with skinny English or French people. It's a look that only they can pull off. You gotta be skinny as hell, cheekbones and jawlines and like kind of hollowed cheeks. I mean, you gotta really be underweight to pull that look off. It fits their history from, I don't know when that was popular, 200 to 300 years ago, or again when they had a resurgence in the early 90s. To put a pox in the role usually looks ridiculous unless there's some self-awareness and some humor going on there. It's as if you put an Irish person in Africa with some tribal costume. People wouldn't know what the hell was going on. We would know that we were watching some Jim Carrey cocaine silliness, which is fine because it is aware of how silly it is when everyone, like actors and production companies, just seems to be high off their ass. Which I guess now would be a hate crime and make you literally an Austrian corporal. At some point, you just have to be honest and tell these people how developmentally disabled they are. Yeah, they'll call you istophobic, but in case you haven't noticed, they have scared normies with that word for a long time. It's a control term that got us to this point. These people are like Scientologists, or worse, really, because Bolsheviks are much more dangerous than L. Ron Hubbard fans, whose books I loved as a kid. Scientologists just want your money. Bolsheviks actually want to genocide you. And I didn't hate Battlefield Earth either, the movie or the book. I like these books. But the thing is, when you see these movies, you got to go into it with the book state of mind. Like, the book was ridiculous and it kind of worked. It's like, so was the movie. But apparently I have horrible taste in movies because I thought Waterworld was cool also for what it was. Like, you've got to judge movies on their in-movie universe sort of thing. So Dracula sort of set the tone for the Dracula vibe. You had the two chicks running around in their sexy costumes for the time. I forget their names, Lacey and Lucy or something like that. Sort of a BDSM vibe more than an actual satanic vibe. And actually, now that I think about it, it also sort of has a non-consensual snuggle thing going on as well, which is pretty popular with people, in a fantasy setting. My point is, it starts as an Eastern European story, in a story setting, though a lot of places do have vampire mythology. But Bram Stoker set the mold when he wrote that really overwritten book. Oh, that was a chore. I just gave away a copy of that. What a chore to get through that thing. That is spawned hundreds of movies, because writers and Hollywood love dressing people up in these gothic clothings and the settings, castles and horse-drawn carriages. People love the idea of howling wolves, full moons with foggy graveyards and castles outlined by that full moon. It's a certain vibe you've got going on here. Now, here is the not politically correct bit, as if the earlier stuff was politically correct. It's okay to tell people what you want. If you want to keep the European vibe of these stories, if you want to see European people in European stories, then you have to say that. That is something your average liberal just cannot do. They're terrified to show any in-group preference. Where people like me, and probably you istophobic bastard, have gone the other direction in that regard. Just letting it all hang out here. We need to bring back a little more honesty. If you say that you want to see the original European stories, they will try to shame you, but you can use their language against them. Just be as ridiculous as they are by explaining that you're also marginalized and oppressed and disenfranchised, as shown by the hatred against your tribe. And if they deny that, then say, look, you're oppressing me literally right now. If you can do it with a straight face and just turn it around on them, it's like, oh, these are ridiculous rules created by ridiculous Marxists, but they work both ways, because it's all subjective, isn't it? I mean, if you feel disenfranchised, go, well, how are you oppressed? It's not my job to educate you. Just listen and believe. That smarmy, sort of supercilious, patriarchal tone they strike. You just turn around and use it on them. Like Elizabeth Warren, I am a indigenous person of color. Wait, isn't she like anywhere from 1/512th to 1/2048th American Indian? Yeah, exactly. The Trail of Tears. That was us. Or you don't even have to engage with them. Just say what you want and stick to it. Ultimately, you have to stand up or let them keep peeing on your leg if that's what you enjoy. The thing is, in terms of pop culture, films, streaming shows, comics, it's over. Anything in the mainstream is completely over. It's why stuff like Comicsgate is so popular, because they're actually producing content, and as rough as some of it is, it's light years better. It's better to support some beginning Comicsgate campaign for $35 than to pay your Netflix of $15 a month. Yes, it is worth it. I would rather support Comicsgate all day than pay any of these Amazon Prime, Netflix, HBO Maxes, all that crap. It's beyond the point of redemption, because the social media structure applies a little pressure. But what people don't really get is Disney, Netflix, and the rest are totally on board. They literally hate European people. They are 100% anti-white. At the top, none of the shot callers identify as the group they hate. The pressure is not coming from Twitter. If Disney wanted to ignore Twitter, they absolutely could. How many crazy Twitter SJWs are there that would spurg out at Disney? 10,000, 20,000? The people who want Disney entertainment will continue to pay for it. And the SJWs crying don't hurt Disney. If Disney was pro-white or at least neutral, they'd probably be even more successful. They're willing to lose money to show their hatred for the beautiful people of the light, of Uggs and Starbucks and Volvos. Most normies don't understand what is going on with Disney, Netflix, and Hollywood in general, because the normies don't understand why these companies would hate them just based on being European. Because the normies don't hate people based on ethnicity. They hate people, or at least don't like people, based on observable behavior. where the globalists literally hate people based on ethnicity. Yes, the joke in far-right circles is laughing at normies who learn that the left globalists was the real racist the whole time. Yeah, if you don't see that by now, then you have been deeply asleep and you don't want to wake up. It starts with something simple. Anne Rice wrote a bunch of vampire books. She used certain characters. You want to see those characters. They don't need to be reimagined or updated. If they want to write a new story, write a new story. When you put non-Euros in some Eastern European story, or European story in general, it immediately destroys the willing suspension of disbelief. It destroys the authenticity of the story. You want to see some fair English girl, but instead you get someone who is totally out of place in the story. You get some story that goes from Eastern Europe to England to New Orleans, and then 400 years ago, where a pure European person would be the norm, not a pox, who would definitely stick out at that time. The liberal hears me speak like this, and they lose their freaking minds. They would rather to pretend to accept the lie that everyone sees this reimagined story and is on board with it. Write something fresh. Interview with a Vampire has already been written, I think 30 years ago. If you want black vampires, which I think there were some movies made in the 70s, like Dracula or something, simply write your own story. The problem is that takes skill and time, and how many black folks in general are into vampires? And even if there is an audience, are you willing to put in decades of work? Will you wait decades for success? Bram Stoker and Anne Rice wrote authentic stories. The stories felt organic, but in the remakes we know they're not organic, they're propaganda.